Hello, everybody. My name is Sean Menard. I'm the City Councillor for Capital Ward, and we've got a good crowd still coming in here now. So thank you all so much for joining us here tonight. It should be a great discussion. The discussion's on the new official plan. We've been seeing a lot of questions come in from community associations and individuals about the draft plan. So very happy to host this meeting with along with the members of the planning department and the staff. I'll name them in a few minutes. They should be able to get you some more clarity and have a good conversation about what the new OP means for the future of Ottawa and Capital Ward specifically. We also wanted to let you know that we are recording this meeting as well. So it can be available to be distributed after this evening. So here's the rough agenda for the evening. After I say a few words, staff will give a presentation on the new official plan based on the questions submitted in advance by community associations and individuals. We'll give a chance for the OP lead from each community association to briefly react or ask a follow-up question. So if you are the main planner from your community association, I think you're prepared to do that and for staff to respond. And then we'll open the floor to a few general questions from participants. After that, we're going to be breaking into several virtual rooms for a more detailed discussion and then come back together to close the meeting. So a few housekeeping notes. If you want to ask questions in the large room or the breakout rooms, please just raise your hand, use the raise hand function, and we can unmute you. You can also write questions in the chat box if you're more comfortable. But as these tend to get buried a little bit, we find the hand option works better, but we will definitely log those questions if you do put them in the chat. And midway through the meeting, you'll have an opportunity to select a breakout room based on your community association. So if depending where you're located, if you're in Old Ottawa South, for example, there'll be a specific one for you. Depending on the numbers, we may combine a few community associations together to make sure we have the best options for discussions with staff. And at this point, I want to also introduce and thank, first of all, Ariella Summit from my office, as well as Jonathan McLeod, Miles Crutter, and Mel Boyer as well. And Mel is going to be acting as a timekeeper facilitator to make sure everything goes on track. Mel, can you just give a wave if you're there?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mel.
No worries.
And so at this point, I wanted to go through some of the fantastic staff that are with us here today. Alain Migueles, who is the lead policy planner on the official plan, will be giving the presentation. And Charmaine Forgy, who is managing public outreach, will speak to us beforehand about the timelines and ways to engage. And once we split into smaller groups, there'll be a planner in each room to answer your questions. So we've got Emily Davies, David Maloney, Jocelyn Cadjo, Carol Ruddy, Jason Koulis, Chris Nagayan, and Charmaine and Alain, of course, and Nick Stowe here to help us out. I think I also saw David Wise sneaking on the conversation too, so hopefully can say hi to him as well. So just as a preliminary opening, obviously this is a big and very important document for the City of Ottawa. There's a lot of good in here from what I've been reading. We know we need to intensify. The 15-minute neighborhood concept is important. Climate change is addressed. I think there's a lot of questions as well about how we can further address that, how COVID will affect the way our city is organized and what tools we have to ensure there is affordable housing, how we can preserve the character of our neighborhoods has been coming up a lot, and ensuring that secondary plans that have been worked on are respected. And so I'm really hopeful that this will be at the start of a good conversation, and heartened to share that these timelines for feedback and consultation have been extended. We just got that memo yesterday from city staff. And so Charmaine will give you more details about this now. So Charmaine, I think I'll hand it over to you if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Councillor. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and thank you to all the residents who are here tonight as well. I'm going to speak a little bit about the timelines, how they have shifted. And I just want to do a shout out to the councillor. We're trying something a little bit different with the breakout rooms. So I'm just going to ask everyone for your patience. I've done it before and it's worked out wonderfully. However, IT glitches do happen. And so we do have a backup plan if it doesn't work exactly how we want. And so I do thank the counselor and his assistants for allowing us to try something new. We're always trying to do innovative, creative things with this virtual world. So thank you so much, counselor, for trying something different. I really appreciate it. So thank you. So as you all are probably aware, a memo was issued yesterday just before council that we're extending, going back with our final draft of the new official plan in the fall. A date has not been set for when we'll be going back, but that does give us some additional time. The ink hasn't really dried on that memo, but I will tell you, rest assured that March 12th is the deadline for what was on our Engage Ottawa as our initial feedback. So we still would really appreciate all of the feedback that you can give us. The earlier we get feedback, it's great because it really helps the planners have that information as they're finalizing the policies and the recommendations. So earlier feedback, as everyone knows, is best. However, feedback will be, I'm coming up with a plan, I'm adjusting it. And so I will be sharing it with the counselor. I will be doing a memo to mayor and council. I am taking tomorrow and Monday's family day. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break and say, I'll try my best to do it for the end of next week, but probably the following week. And there will be outlined of what our engagement activities will be. But I'm just rest assured, I think there was some misinformation that feedback will be accepted. And we want to have your feedback right until we go to the joint committee and to council. Of course, the sooner we can get your feedback, the best, but we welcome your feedback right up until that day. But I will be having different opportunities to engage and for that feedback. But I just want everyone rest assured, and I will be sharing that plan with everyone. And so I hope that makes everyone feel a little bit more comfortable. Tonight is a great opportunity for the city staff, for the planners to listen. We're here to listen, to receive your feedback, and to answer your questions. If the questions cannot be answered by the subject matter experts, they will take them back and respond. And thank you so much. We did receive quite a few questions from different folks. Which is great. That shows the passion and commitment that you have to your community. And I thank you for that. Without your involvement, well, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here tonight. And so I thank you for that, the passion, commitment to what you want for your community. You know your community better than anyone else. And so thank you for that. This is a one opportunity and there will be others. So I won't take up more time. I'm going to put it over to Ellen, who's going to walk you through the presentation that's based on the questions received to date. And then as the counselor says, this is the opportunity for a Q&A. And so I hope this is a great night, and I'm hoping IT, cross my fingers, everything works, and we'll see where we get from. So thank you for your patience, and certainly thank you for coming out tonight. Thanks. Over to Ellen.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. Welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a presentation that I think will take about 10-15 minutes at the most. As Charmaine said, we want to leave the bulk of the evening for your questions and some answers that we can provide. This is an open consultation. Again, we are here to listen. No decisions are made tonight. I do want to say that we have reviewed your comments and we are prepared for them. Once again, the various rooms that have been set up are there to organize us so that we can get to as many of the comments as possible. So just if we move to slide number 2, please. Just quickly, what I want to cover today, first of all, I think our team's been introduced, but I want to talk about some of the new things that are part of the official plan, basically how we organize the city by transects. I want to talk about secondary plans, special districts, and then some of the concepts that have gone into all the public discussion around the official plan, 15-minute neighborhoods, growth management and regeneration, housing, and then the urban tree canopy, which is of prime importance in central neighborhoods and in urban neighborhoods. And just to cover a few next steps again before we move on to questions. So please, next slide. If we look at, first of all, the structure of the official plan. Now, in the existing official plan, you would not see the level of detail by context that we've introduced. The existing official plan basically has a rural area and an urban area. And in the urban area, basically it's a set of policies that is a one-size-fit-all. Now,
hi, Ally. Sorry, it's Sean. I don't know. We're hearing some nice opera, beautiful voice in the background. I'm not sure if that's on your end or somebody else's end here, but if everyone else can please go on mute.
Yes, no, that is in my house. My daughter has a music lesson. Unfortunately, I hope you can still hear me.
I'm sorry. Okay. Yes, it is a little distracting, but I'm not sure if there's another room or something. But
I've closed my door.
With it. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Beautiful voice, by the way.
Thank you. I'll let her know. So the new official plan is basically organized in transect areas, and transect areas are what you see here. This is a close-up of Schedule A1. So there is the downtown core transect area, and most of Ward 17 is in the inner urban. Actually, I think all of Ward 17 is in the inner urban transect area. And you can see that we've also superimposed rapid transit. So red for rail and blue for bus. So this is how we want to capture the various contexts, planning contexts of the city. Each of these transect areas has its own goals and its own objectives with respect to urban form, with respect to development, with respect to mobility. So we have mobility policies now in the official plan, and it really lets us capture the planning direction that we want to give to each part of the city based on its context, based on its needs, and based on its, where we see things going there in the next 25 years. Next slide, please. So the B series of schedules is the designations and the overlays. So just as in today's official plan, there are designations. In the new official plan, these are no longer land use designations. They are functional designations. And the main designations you find are neighborhood, corridor, and hubs. So there's a gradation of intensity, there's a gradation of function, there's a gradation of activity, as well as of mobility. Hubs are where you would find rapid transit stations. Main streets, which are the major corridors, basically are the frequent street bus routes that feed into stations, and minor corridors are a new designation that we've introduced in this official plan. You can see they're the thinner line, and those are basically streets that play that function, but at a lower level, at a smaller scale, more within neighborhoods. And then the overlays are there to guide evolution. They do two things. They talk about density and they talk about urban form. In the transforming overlay, which applies to the urban neighborhoods north of the Rideau River, there's a few things that go with it. One is that it requires new development to be urban in typology as opposed to suburban. And it comes with the new rule that says no new curb cuts are allowed. And this is designed to maintain the urban tree canopy along the streets and to prevent the continuous erosion of green space in front yards. So basically, if you have one curb cut today, you only get one if you're redeveloping, no matter how many lots you're creating or how many units you're creating as a result of that development. It does mean shared driveways like many people already have, and it means maintaining more of the green in front. Next slide, please. So secondary plans. The mandate that we received from council was to look at all the secondary plans that exist in the city. There were 83 of them, and sort them out. Some are recommended for repeal, and in Ward 17, the one that is recommended for repeal is Confederation Heights. The federal government is working on a brand new plan for that area, and we're working with PSPC, the NCC, and other federal stakeholders to come up with a new one. Basically, Confederation Heights remains designated as a hub, but the old secondary plan from 1990 is recommended for repeal. Other than that, the more recent secondary plans, including the Old Ottawa East, are carried forward. The policy content of them is brought forward. There is what we call a consistency review, which means that we have to align the language to the language of the new official plan, but the directions provided by the policy in the existing secondary plans are the directions that you will find in the new secondary plans. I just want to mention as well for people in the glebe that we have, of course, the heightened character study that is supposed to be in front of Planning Committee this spring. That will become a secondary plan, and that secondary plan will be incorporated into the new official plan. Next slide, please. So here's an example in Old Ottawa East, the secondary plan and its designations. We can answer questions about the Old Ottawa East secondary plans. Obviously, Old Ottawa East now finds itself in two transect areas, the downtown core transect area and the inner urban transect area. That doesn't mean that any of the policies disappear. It just means that they're found in two different places. There is an Old Ottawa East secondary plan that is carried forward and covers the area in the inner urban transect. And then there is a portion of Old Ottawa East that now forms part of the Central and East Downtown Core Secondary Plan, but the policies that apply to that geography are the same. Next slide, please. There are special districts that are introduced in the new official plan. These are areas of the city that transcend the function of neighborhood, corridor, or hub. They really are the special areas of the city that basically are our face internationally. They're the postcards of the city. They're the ones that most define the image of Ottawa in terms of heritage, in terms of culture, heritage value, the arts and culture sector, architecture, public realm. So these now receive special treatment in the official plan. They are distinct areas and they have their own policies. There are two that are of interest, of course, Rideau Canal Special District and the Lansdowne Special District. And there are policies in the draft OP that address each of them. Next slide, please. So in terms of 15-minute neighborhoods, by and large, most of Ward 17 is in an urban area that can be described as a vibrant 15-minute neighborhood already. These are areas that are mostly pre-World War II, even 19th century in some cases. They're compact. They have a strong connectivity with their street grid. They have a mix of uses already. And really the direction of the official plan is to keep it that way. The direction of the official plan is to, well, not only keep it that way, but to sustain the conditions that make it possible. And that means maintain a range of housing types, maintain the diversity of shops and services, maintain local access to the things that make a 15-minute neighborhood, including schools, daycares, parks, pathways, green space, good public realm. And basically, the goal here is to expand the geography of the city where people can live with or without a car. The city should be about giving people that choice. It's not about imposing one mode or the other, but it's just to let people choose viably to do one or the other. So we do, in this particular part of town, have existing 15-minute neighborhoods that are actually, models for other parts of the city. In other parts of the city and in other parts of the inner urban transect where those conditions are not necessarily there, the aim of the official plan is to get them to get there and to favor or to encourage the conditions and the ingredients, if you will, of 15-minute neighborhoods that will allow new ones to strengthen, to evolve, to blossom. And that's very much what the inner urban transect and the application of overlays is intended to do. The overlays are in part there to guide the evolution of neighborhoods that are not necessarily 15-minute neighborhoods today, and to give them the ingredients to become 15-minute neighborhoods over the life of the plan. Next slide, please. You've heard a lot about the growth management strategy of the city. We were talking about the urban boundary this week at council. So as you've heard before, the city has to make room for 400,000 more residents by 2046. So that means deciding where they're going to live, and the 5 big moves basically established a very clear direction that we want most growth to be in existing built-up areas. So through intensification, which we now describe as regeneration. And again, you'll note that subtle shift in language. There is obviously still a big focus on intensification, but the language of the official plan is now regeneration. And that's meant to convey that we have been listening to what people have said in neighborhoods, that it should be about more than just hitting targets and hitting numbers. It should be about planning for complete communities. It should be planning for 15-minute neighborhoods. It should not be just about cramming in more people in, but making sure that neighborhoods are keeping up with the services that they need, with the supports that they need, with the public space and the green space that they need to accommodate the extra population. So we have very ambitious targets in terms of regeneration. And in terms of the inner urban transect, it does mean taking a very close look at how things are built. And basically in terms of urban design, which is the 3rd big move, we want to start to give much clearer direction as to how infill looks, how infill is designed, and how infill fits in established streetscapes. In neighborhoods that are urban, basically what we're saying is that we don't want to suburbanize urban neighborhoods. We want to require new infill to be truly urban in form, which means good urban design, architecture that fits. Also, dealing with things like parking in a way that is urban as opposed to suburban, maintaining and respecting the green front yards and the alignment of trees along streets. And that's why the definitions of urban in the official plan are very important. Next slide, please. Part of the growth management strategy involves making sure that as we welcome new residents into the existing neighborhoods, that we're ensuring that there is a balance in terms of the types of homes that are going to be built. And this is why you're going to see in this table, there's a lot in this table, but basically by transect area and by designation, we talk about minimum density, but we also talk about minimum large dwellings that need to be provided. And large dwellings, just to make that concept very simple, is dwellings that have 3 or more bedrooms. What we're trying to do here is to give chances and opportunities to, let's just say young families starting out and wanting to raise a family and have kids, to not be forced only into suburban options, but to have options in existing neighborhoods where they have low-rise residential dwellings with a foot on the ground, with a yard, and within established areas that are already close to things, that are already 15-minute neighborhoods. So the minimum large dwelling proportion is there to ensure that when regeneration is taking place, that depending on where you are, and let's say in the inner urban neighborhoods, 50% of the dwellings that are built are large dwellings. And that's a very important piece. It also helps us stay in compliance with the provincial policy statement with respect to housing diversity. Next slide, please. So in terms of housing, the goal of the official plan here is to enable flexibility and, of course, an adequate supply and diversity of housing options. We have policies that seek to protect existing rental housing and support the production of more rental housing units. That has been a real and ongoing problem. Before the pandemic, there has been a long history of very, very low vacancy rates in Ottawa. And that has been exacerbated by the transformation of several rental units into Airbnbs. So there's a new short-term rental bylaw that council has just passed, and this is all fitting together. So one more thing that I want to add in case that there's questions later is that the official plan has policies that set the stage for inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is a new tool that would allow the city to require a certain percentage of housing to be affordable. And the study on what that means is ongoing right now. Next slide, please. In terms of urban tree canopy and green space, you'll notice that we have new policies that have increased our urban tree canopy objective to 40%. This goes hand in hand with the new tree bylaws that have just come in this year. Those targets are now also linked to our climate change objectives. And as I said, what you've seen in terms of the draft policies with respect to front yards and limiting the number of curb cuts is also specifically aimed at making sure that in infill situations that we are keeping as much green and soil possible in front yards to support trees and to support the growth of trees in the urban area. Next slide, please. So I'll conclude here. This is a very quick overview, but basically in terms of next steps, as Charmaine said, the deadline for comments on this draft have been extended to March 12th. And the rest of this slide now will have to change. Maybe Charmaine can say a couple of more things about this, but there will be additional time for public feedback as we move to open houses and then the public open houses in the fall for the draft official plan that will be presented later than to council. Thank you very much, Councillor, and my team and I are here to answer questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alain. That's very helpful. We will begin to take questions. We're going to go through the community associations and the planning representative from each community association. I think before we do that, one of the things that comes up often, Alain, that I'll ask you folks right off the bat is around our traditional main streets and the heights that'll be coming in on our traditional main streets and what those are pegged for. And my understanding is 9 is what it would be if there's no secondary plan. And then the heights along in traditional residential areas, it's looking like 3 or 4. And if you could just explain the 9 stories and then the 3 or 4 and what parameters would be there to get up to 4 stories within traditional residential neighborhoods. If you could just comment on that first, and then we'll move to each of the community association reps.
Sure, thanks. So with respect to main streets, the main street policy is still that mid-rise buildings are permitted, and mid-rise is 5 to 9 stories. We do have new policies that also talk about making sure that you have enough land for a transition. So you don't necessarily get 9 stories. The land on which you're building has to be large enough to ensure a transition in built form, especially at corner lots. One thing that's important as well is that where there is a secondary plan, the secondary plan takes precedence. That's a system we have now, and that system continues. With respect to neighborhood streets, in the official plan today, it's in the general urban, it's low rise, and low rise is up to 4 stories, and that would stay the same. Neighborhoods are low rise. What happens then is that the zoning bylaw introduces the appropriate height restrictions, based on context, and that's what would happen here as well.
Okay, thank you. And as you noted at the beginning, there is a glebe height and character study coming in, which would be established as right in the official plan for that portion of Bank Street. Of course, Old Ottawa East has a secondary plan. And I guess the question from some other communities is, well, if they're looking, Old Ottawa South on that Bank Street area, similar to the glebe, how could they get a secondary plan in? Is it going to be too late to put one in before the official plan or in conjunction with it? If you could just answer that, and then I'll move right away to I think first Carolyn McKenzie, and then we'll move on.
Sure. So Old Ottawa South, the Bank Street, there's a CDP that's several years old. The CDP is still going to be there. If council or planning committee were to approve a redo of that CDP and to transform it into a secondary plan, I guess that would be introduced into our work plan, and then we would carry on. So the way that we work is, if there's secondary planning studies that councillors or communities are interested in having us do, they have to be presented to planning committee that approves our work plan and approves our resources. And then if it gets on our list, then we would do it.
Okay, thanks very much. Carolyn, are you ready, or do you want me to go to somebody else first?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Elena, for the presentation. Appreciate that, and I can only imagine how much effort, and I know that staff have been under tremendous timelines to produce the draft official plan. So appreciate all the effort that's gone into it. I do think that there are a lot of very good objectives and lots of good ideas that we're seeing in the draft official plan. I think I do think that there are a lot of questions, so I don't know how many questions I'm allowed. So maybe can you give me a sense of that? I'm not sure.
Try to stick to like two at the most type of thing.
My top two. Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Okay, so very quickly, and maybe this won't count. Questions about questions. Is the intent to try and answer questions that have already been submitted or will be submitted shortly? I would say regarding the official plan, because it's difficult in a number of cases to provide comments where the intent or the it's just not clear. There's a sufficient number of questions. So I'm just trying to get a sense of timing, because it doesn't seem like a good effort to put together a number of comments if they're based on misconceptions that could be very quickly clarified. So that would be my first question. Hopefully that's a quick one.
Sure.
And now if I can have two others.
So let me just
Okay.
answer that one, Carolyn. So
Sure, yeah.
written questions we can provide written answers to, and I think of the batch that you sent, we're pretty much ready to send you the written answers.
Okay, that's great. I'll kind of repeat the one of the questions that I had that I posed to you at the Planning Advisory Committee of the city last week, which again sort of relates to very much to modeling. One of the things that I think is really important, and I know you're hearing this from me again, is the idea that we see the modeling that supports the proposals for built form height. Sean mentioned up to zoning that might allow for, say, 4 stories on neighborhood streets, zoning, different anticipated zoning on different types of streets. I do think, and I'll say it again, that it's really important that modeling that supports that, much like we saw for the urban boundary discussion, be provided to the community at large. Again, we can debate the assumptions that go into the modeling, but I think it's really important that we see that we understand that if and when we go to 4 stories, why that might be necessary, and why, if we're moving towards a more dense form that can accommodate more people, why that should be necessary. And just one example, a couple examples, and I've already mentioned the possibility of 4 stories on our neighborhood streets, which are in general like 2 and 3 stories. So that's quite a big concern. Also, the idea that dense form will have us looking at, will reinforce what we're already seeing, I think, of shallow or zero front yard setbacks. I think most recently we have seen, as a result of intensification, the loss of trees. That buildings and development are winning over trees. And so how do we reconcile those things? How do we reconcile the tree canopy targets and the statements in the draft official plan about the importance of trees and green space and climate change impacts and so on, and the importance of trees with this dense form that seems like it might possibly really endanger not only the existing trees, but even the possibility of planting trees in future. So I think the modeling question is really important that be shared, so we can see all of those, why some of those proposals may or may not be necessary. And I guess a very big topic, and when we can't wrestle to the ground tonight, is just the topic of neighborhoods. I think neighborhoods are really important to meeting the objectives of the official plan, both in terms of how we achieve our growth management objectives, how we achieve mobility and sustainable mobility in particular. I think neighborhoods should be at the center. The word neighborhoods, I think, shows up. Someone did a search 87 times, something like that, in the draft official plan. But there seems to be a disconnect from some of the aspirational statements and the objectives to the nuts and bolts of how that's going to come out. When you were talking during the slide presentation about the importance of neighborhoods and 15-minute neighborhoods, those are all fantastic things, and I think most people really support the idea of promoting 15-minute neighborhoods. But how are we going to get there? How are we going to know what those parameters are that really make up the 15-minute neighborhood, any 15-minute neighborhood, ours in particular in the glebe, others around the city? How are we going to know that? What are the parameters? I think a lot more thought needs to go into the mechanics of that, and how we'll continue to monitor and measure our progress towards that, and potentially even our progress to detracting from 15-minute neighborhoods if we start getting to a point where we're putting too much density into neighborhoods and bringing those parameters out of balance. So I guess that would be I think there's much more discussion that needs to happen around the 15-minute neighborhood issue. Thank you. I'll leave it there. Leave time for others. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. We agree. I think you're right. 15-minute neighborhood, and that the discussion of what composes 15-minute neighborhoods, and what are the policies that should be there in order to support them. They are things that we want to continue talking to the public about. We will have more information on the public consultation that we did. You remember we had an online survey on 15-minute neighborhoods, and we've been able to work with all that data and map all that data, and we will be presenting that. In terms of the modeling, I just want to touch on this because there's different levels of modeling that we do. At this stage, we're still modeling in terms of projections. And the modeling in terms of built form really will happen when the zoning bylaw exercise begins. At this point, the official plan is not saying that there will be 4 stories on that street or that other street. It's saying that in neighborhoods, just like you see today in the general urban area, you should have low-rise buildings. That's all it's saying. And the neighborhood by neighborhood work that would then determine the zoning is what comes under the zoning bylaw. So the modeling that you're referring to, and that in your community association you did very successfully with when we were talking about Bank Street and the glebe, that comes later when we talk about zoning.
Can I ask just a quick follow-up there, and then I'll—
Very quick one.
Yeah, very quick. So I think it would be if it's the case that we'll leave it to the modeling, the detailed modeling will come later, and we'll leave it to the zoning. I guess my concern, or my what I would say about that, was that I think we need strong enough or clear enough language in the OP to make that clear, because I think in the past we've seen zoning be in effect, but language in the OP that has enabled developers, proponents, applicants to leverage more broad language in the OP and point to that broader language and say, yeah, the provincial policy statement compels us to intensify. And there we've got this broader language that allows for, I'll say in this case, up to 4 stories. And therefore the zoning may be the zoning, but I'm going to point to all this higher level language. And that seems to carry the day at planning committee, and indeed staff reports, in support of that sort of application. So I think we need to, if that's the case, we need to be awfully careful about the language that's in the OP, that it doesn't become a point of leverage to look beyond and over the zoning to point to that language as a rationale for something more that is actually intended. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move then, and Al, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that just very briefly, but if you can, if you'd like. But if
no, I comment noted. No, thanks.
Okay. We'll move now, I think, to Ron Rose from Old Ottawa East. Ron, are you there? I think I see you there. There you are. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Sean, and thanks to you and to your staff for organizing this session. It's going to be really helpful. And I'd like to start by saying, personally, I've been quite impressed with the amount of effort that the staff of the city have put into responding to community requests. I've watched a number of videos of different community associations. Staff have always been there. They've provided answers. They haven't tried to evade. They've been upfront, and that kind of commitment is much appreciated, especially in times of COVID and all the other challenges that we all face. I think I want to start off by saying that we've worked very hard as a community to make ourselves a coherent, cohesive community that I would certainly say is a 15-minute community. We worked hard to get our main street converted as a complete street with much wider sidewalks, bicycle lanes, narrow traffic lanes. We worked very hard as a community to get the Flora footbridge, which provides us links with other neighborhoods. We get the sense from this official plan that our neighborhood is being torn apart. So our first ask would have to be, we want our community made whole again. Alain started off by noting that all of Ward 17 is in the inner urban transect, then corrected himself to point out that there are a couple of parts of our neighborhood that are in fact in the downtown transect, the neighborhood north of Highway 417 and the neighborhood east of Brunswick, which particularly includes Springhurst Park. We see no logic for that division. The neighborhoods that are taken away from Old Ottawa East are much closer to Old Ottawa East than they are to downtown. So we would like to see all of Old Ottawa East in the inner urban transect. We would like to see Old Ottawa East covered under one single secondary plan. We foresee some difficulties. For example, we recognize that Old Ottawa East as a community is going to remain the same. Our boundaries as a community will be the same, but for planning purposes, we are being split up. When we want to do something in Springhurst Park, currently we go to our Ward 17 councillor, make proposals, and together we go to the city. Under the downtown transect, we might have to negotiate with 3 separate councillors to get changes to our park, and that's just going to make our life much more difficult. So if I have to be limited to 2 questions, number 1, why has our community been split into the 2 transects, which has generated 2 separate secondary plans? We want to be made whole again. And secondly, we want to be covered under one single secondary plan. If I'm limited to 2, then those are them.
So I'd like to start by saying, Mr. Rose, it's absolutely not the intent of this official plan to tear any community apart. That is absolutely not the intent. When we were mapping the transects, we were looking at what appeared to us as the natural outlines of the various context areas. And I would say it's more than just the 417. In the case of the downtown core transect, it's also when you're coming up the Rideau Canal and you pass the Pretoria Bridge and you're into that area of the canal that bends, the elbow that leads into Ottawa U, that's downtown. That's a downtown environment. That's part of the picturesque of the downtown core. It seemed to us anyways that it made logical sense to think of the downtown core in those terms, in terms of, how it is outlined in the various cultural and landmark type maps of the city. It doesn't mean that it splits the community apart at all. As it relates to Springhurst Park, I would just simply comment that we don't feel strongly one way or another. The park is part of the neighborhood. That outline probably is simply a consequence of the park also being in the area covered by the Lees Station community design plan. And it just seemed to make sense to leave those boundaries there. But we're not married to Springhurst Park being in one or the other in particular. I just wanted to give that information in terms of how we saw the outline of these areas as making sense in terms of their context. Thank you.
One thing I will note, Alain, is that the unfortunately the Alta Vista Transportation Corridor is still in there, and something many of these communities have been advocating to take out of the TMP. So any reference to it in the official plan, people will get their backs up. Any reference to it in the TMP that remains, people are really wanting to stop that road through the middle of our communities, which I think in this day and age, we don't know why we'd be building that across our communities through a park. So that just to follow up on one comment around the AVTC, I think and we'd like to really work on that together. Ron, is there something else you want to add before we end on the Old Ottawa East portion?
Just two quick comments. Number one, I'm glad to hear that staff is open to making changes. And I would just like some confirmation that yes, staff, if we point out things that make sense, that staff would be willing to consider making changes. Second comment is that when you're taking that boat trip from the Bank Street Bridge along the canal, you're probably just as much in a downtown milieu as you are once you pass under the Pretoria Bridge and start going past King's Landing and Nicholas Street. So I would urge you to reconsider that particular boundary and maybe look at using the 417 from Nicholas through to the Pretoria Bridge as a boundary. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron.
Thank you, sir. And as we said, we are here to listen.
That's very helpful feedback. You can go back on mute. And Barbara Brown, I see you have your hand up. We're just going through the planning reps at each community association. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for general questions before we split into the groups that are more community specific. So Laura, I'm going to go to you from Old Ottawa South. Are you here with us? There you are, Laura.
Yes, I am. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for holding this. Thank you to staff for being here. We had a community meeting a couple of weeks ago. Unfortunately, staff were not able to attend that one, but I know that you can't attend absolutely everything. We also sent in a list of questions in mid-January, and I know you've asked us for 8 priority questions that we subsequently submitted. Now that we have the extra time, we do hope that we can get all of our questions answered if that's possible, not just the priority questions, please. I had a question for you, Ellen. The CDP that we have, I know that we have some Bank Street guidelines that I believe you did in the early 2000s, but I'm not aware of a specific CDP. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sorry, could you maybe help me out? What area in particular are you referring to?
So you refer to a CDP for Old Ottawa South?
Yes, Bank Street, Old Ottawa South has a CDP.
So I believe that you had done some guidelines in the early 2000s, but I didn't realize that had gone to a CDP.
Myself personally, no, but I know that the city had done perhaps guidelines. Maybe it's not called a CDP, but it's essentially a similar type of document that is not statutory, but that council should have regard for when processing applications in it.
Sure, and I believe that was like 2003 or something. I'll have to look that up. Thank you. In terms of our neighborhood, we of course have a few questions. Certainly having Sunnyside as a minor corridor, if we could have at least that modeled to know what the limitations would be in terms of heights due to the width of the street, just between the area where it's going to be a minor corridor between Bronson and Bank. I think that would help alleviate a number of concerns. And the depth of the corridor, if there's a lot assembly there with lots, say, from Sunnyside to Hopewell, could that possibly occur? And then have, from Sunnyside to Hopewell function as the extent of the corridor. So I think that's a big question, and anything you could provide us on the possibility of development on Sunnyside and limitations that would happen as a result of the right of way and the width of the street there would certainly be helpful. Another concern, and I think this is a big concern in our community, is that what makes our community special is the diversity of forms that we have in our community. And it is exactly the mature neighborhoods overlay that currently exists that presents your street, gives you your rules, is what helps us here in terms of height, in terms of maintaining setbacks. The policies for the urban forms in the new draft official plan with reduced front yard setbacks, reduced side yard setbacks, minimum heights of 3 stories, with the possibility of 4, the possible limitation of low density typologies. These things work in concert, and some of them directly conflict with the mature neighborhoods overlay. So the zoning can come later. But to reiterate what Carolyn was saying, if the official plan allows permissions that are greater than what the zoning allows, then of course the official plan in a sense rules. So for us, where we have different heights in different areas of the neighborhood, and the mature neighborhoods overlay helps to ensure that new development that comes in, whether it's a single unit, a triplex, or even in future a small apartment building, if those forms are designed within the official plan, if the language of the policy is there to ensure that the character elements that the mature neighborhoods overlay helps to guarantee remain, then certainly we would welcome some of the new denser typologies within the neighborhood streets of Old Ottawa South. Our problem is at the moment that reading the language of the OP, what we see are that these new urban forms that we are all gearing to are allowed writ large all over the neighborhood. And that anything that comes later in the zoning is limited by what official plan policy is. And the policies writ large of our neighborhood on our neighborhood spell the homogenization of many areas of our neighborhood. So, what can we do within official plan policy in order to ensure that new development is compatible street by street, as in the mature neighborhoods overlay in our neighborhood, at least area by area? Thank you. Question 1.
Okay, so very good questions, Laura, and thanks for asking them. So I think in terms of Sunnyside, the minor corridor and the policies that we have in the draft official plan basically say minor corridors are basically limited to the properties that front onto them. So they don't go back a block or anything like that. It's just the properties that front onto them. And in the case of Sunnyside, I think that one is more just a recognition of what is already. Sunnyside is already a place that has the diversity of housing types that we say should be the expectation for minor corridors. It has little pockets of local shops and stores that are beloved, I think, in the neighborhood. So I think it's more a recognition of what is. It has the bus route, the number 7 going to Carleton. So I think for Sunnyside, more than for any other, it's simply a recognition. And I want to put people's mind at ease that the designation doesn't mean that the zoning changes tomorrow morning. The zoning is still a completely different exercise that has to go through consultation, that has to go through a public process and everything that we know. Now, in terms of neighborhoods, that's a very important question that you asked, because we want this official plan to build on everything we've been working on since the mature neighborhoods overlay and go a couple of steps further to make it stronger, to make it better, so that When we're saying, buildings have to be of an urban character, if you look at the way that we've defined it, basically what we're saying is that we don't want them to be of a suburban character. In other words, we don't want the 71 Hopewells that kickstarted the whole mature neighborhood overlays 12 years ago to be the norm. We don't want the garage in the front special. We don't want the front yard pavement special. We want buildings that sit on their parcel with green front yards and trees. And if you need to access with a car, that you use shared driveways if you're doing more than one lot. Basically, that's what we've been trying to get. And that some people in the infill industry have been resisting, but that we're going to go all the way with in this official plan because it's very important. There is no other way in our minds that infill can be successful in established neighborhoods unless it respects that kind of character. And if you look at the older neighborhoods in the city, not just Old Ottawa South, Old Ottawa East, Sandy Hill, Centertown, Golden Triangle, the neighborhoods that were built before the automobile became the ruler of space, the way that space is designed and the way that things are function make it so that buildings are facing the public realm and all the functions are neatly camouflaged and tucked away. And there's ways to do this. It just takes smart design. That's what we want the new official plan to do. If you're going to intensify, but intensify well. Are the buildings functioning and are they looking good? Are they fitting into the streetscape? That's what we want this to do. And we're starting at the official plan policy level. We're starting with elements of policy that send direction to zoning. Then when we get to zoning, we can tighten the knots on things that we've been trying to put together with all the OMB hearings and with all the battles and all the back and forth that you and I know quite well, and many people around this room know quite well. This is our opportunity to continue that work. And that's what we want to do with neighborhoods.
Certainly, Miguel. Thank you very much, Ellen. The concern here is that the new urban forms, as maximized or defined within the within the policies of the official plan, say in Table 6 and Section 5, where we have, zero or shallow front yard setbacks, smaller lots with, I also had an additional question. There are parts of the OP that give the minimum height for inner urban neighborhood areas as 3 stories, and another section, another table that gives the minimum height as 2 stories. So I would love to know if it's 2 or 3. But additionally, the urban forms as defined within the draft OP are the greater permission. So zoning can try, can regulate what happens within that, but it can't give permissions, generally speaking, that are tighter than what's allowed in the official plan, because that's the situation we have now, where the official plan says one thing and zoning says another. And quite often proponents say, wait a minute, I'm allowed these, these are my, my rights as of the official plan. And as we've seen time and time again at planning committee and, at in certain cases at the LPAT, the official plan rules basically. So, zero or shallow front yard setbacks might actually work in a couple of areas in Old Ottawa South. But the diversity within our neighborhood is that different streets are diverse, different areas, different pockets have their own charm, their own character. And if the official plan doesn't allow for that to continue, which is what the mature neighborhoods overlay does now, we lose that. And then we get zero or shallow front yard setbacks all over the neighborhood. And eventually over time, our neighborhood loses the compatibility, the charm that exists when the things that come in, which can be a built form that's, similar to, or, somewhat larger than what is there now and houses more people, that is certainly fine, but that still works with its streetscape. How do we guarantee that? Because the zoning, I don't believe, is going to be able to do that if the larger permissions are set in the official plan.
Okay, let me address that because it's a very important question. We don't mean the official plan to change the pattern of setbacks on streets that are urban And in the old city of Ottawa, most urban streets in neighborhoods that are like from the early 20th century are about 3 meters. We call that shallow. There are 19th century neighborhoods, like, you know, in the Byward Market in Lower Town, where you do have a zero. In New Edinburgh, you do have a 0 front yard setback. And that is the appropriate thing for those streets. What that table is meant to capture is basically the characteristics of what we mean by urban form, but then each street has its own character, each street has its own flavor. What it also means is if you have a street where everybody is at that 3 meter setback, a 6 meter setback to stick a car in front is inappropriate. And we don't want that. So that's what we're trying to capture. Does that help? And please give us that feedback. We do want to hear.
Yes, I believe it's in one of our list of 43 questions, because, you know, the idea that, you know, the official plan would allow 0 front yard setbacks in areas of our neighborhood. It's completely
not as of right.
alien.
Absolutely not. No, that's, and you're right to raise it, but that's not the intent.
Okay, so how do we define the intent, I guess, is the question. So that's clear within official plan policy, so it can't be challenged later. And then I also had that question about the inner urban neighborhoods. There's a conflict in the plan where some areas say 2 stories is minimum and other parts of the plan say 3. Which one is it?
Okay, so that's a little bit of planner jargon, and I'm going to explain it because I know it's not easy to understand. When it says in inner urban neighborhoods, you should be at least 2 stories, that's a minimum. Then there's another section that says in inner urban neighborhoods, the zoning should allow for 3 stories. That's different. It's not a requirement. It means it should allow for. And honestly, in a lot of the inner urban neighborhoods where you have R3 zoning, that's done already. If you have zoning that says 10 or 11 meters in height, that's 3 stories. So nothing would change there.
Yeah, no, it's just that different areas of our neighborhood have different heights. Some are at 2 stories and some are at 3. So I think that said, I don't forget the language and I don't have it in front of me right now, but I thought it said generally allow for 3. And then, okay, so 3 is not the minimum height.
No, it's what zoning should allow for.
Okay, all right. So if somebody wanted to build a 2-story duplex, they can, or a 2-story triplex, or however they want to work that out on a smaller site in Old Ottawa South is up to them. You know, that's okay. Thank you. That's what answered. Thank you.
So Laura.
Yeah.
Are you, I think we need to move on to the next participant.
Sure.
That was very helpful though. Thank you for asking those questions. And I think the back and forth helps educate everyone. So I don't want to take up too much more time because we're going to go into breakout soon where there's going to be more questions asked where people have a better chance. Mike Little from Heron Park, I think you're up next, and you can tell us all if there's a score in the hockey game too. I think you're on mute there, Mike. Not sure. You don't look on mute, but we don't hear you.
Okay, well,
there you go. Now you're good.
All right. So hi, everybody. I'm from Heron Park. I wanted to say overall, I really like the overall direction that this official plan has. These are things that I want for the city, for my neighborhood. We want a more urban city where people can enjoy life instead of being afraid of getting hit by a car, or not being able to go out and get groceries without a car, that kind of stuff. And I just don't know whether this official plan is bulletproof enough to get us there. And I don't know if we could ever be that way. But we have a small little community association, especially because the Billings Mall hasn't been built out for residential living. And I know there's some proposals coming, but we don't really know what that looks like yet. So we just have our 1, 3, 4, and 5 sections, and none of this looks really different for us. I really hope that this drives more development towards the Calidar area, Heron and Bank especially, and of course Billings Bridge. But I don't see a lot of changes from our community design plan, which is relatively recent, I think, in the grand scheme of things. but I don't know. I have a lot of uncertainty about how we actually get to completing like the main goals of this official plan. I am not so full of trust in council and in city politics that we actually get there. We feel let down a lot by COFA, by other changes in the community. So we want to see good urbanism. We don't always see it, and I don't know what to look for in here, where I could figure out like, okay, I'm confident that we're going to get the future that's proposed in the overview here. None of this is really criticism or specific stuff for you. It's just how we feel about this right now, like uncertainty and not a lot of confidence.
Thanks for that, Mike. And I hear what you're saying. We as planning staff think that we are into something new. We are a brave city to be doing some of the things that we're doing in this official plan. I don't think any other city in Canada is going as far as we are in some of the things that we're trying to push, including a very ambitious regeneration target, intensification target. And the transect approach is something that no other city in Canada is doing. And it allows us to talk about built form in neighborhoods, in hubs, in corridors in a way that very few cities are talking. So we're developing this without a template, and we're developing it for our city, not off somebody else's template either. So we're doing this together. And I think in the case of Heron Park, I think what the real shot in the arm is going to be for that neighborhood is if Bank Street starts to be built in accordance with that CDP and with that secondary plan. It's a good secondary plan. It has all the ingredients, and what's really missing is people that own the properties along Bank Street to start doing something about it. That's the bottom line. I think the day will come. We're starting to see a lot of interest in some areas of Bank Street. It's still a very suburban looking street as you go down towards, Heron and Walkley and all that. But I think it's close enough that if there's any logical extension of the urban model that can happen, it's also the most important north-south street we have in Ottawa, and that would be the one. We have been talking, incidentally, to people who have picked up on, for instance, close to Kilbourne, we have an area that's not under an overlay, and some people have asked us, well, why not? Yeah, okay, well, we'll take a look at that. There's starting to be genuine interest, even from people in the Alta Vista neighborhood, of looking at Bank Street differently, and we think that's really interesting. But thanks for the comment.
And if you can really herd those Alta Vista people into building up even more, that'd be great, because they got tons of like little tiny suburban houses on huge lots, and it's ridiculous going in, even in our state of development right now in Heron Park, going back and forth between them. There's a huge disconnect, and it's just across the street.
Sure. Yeah, we're having very, very good discussions with Alta Vista. And by the way, that's another neighborhood that sits in two different transects, the inner and the outer.
Okay, thanks so much, Mike, for that. And I know there'll be lots of follow-up. I wanted to make sure, Sue Stefko, I believe you're on the line too from Glebe Annex.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Perfect. So thanks again for everyone for setting this up. This is a really great opportunity. My question isn't necessarily specifically for a neighborhood. It's more of an inner urban downtown thing writ large. And it has to do with green space and has to do with parks. The old plan had a certain amount of hectares per person that was the target, and I'm not sure if that target was met. I don't see that here, and I'm wondering if the city, if I'm missing that, or if that's listed somewhere else, or if the city is walking back that commitment. I know there's a 40% tree canopy. That could be, part of the solution, but as intensification is growing, setbacks are getting smaller, lots are getting smaller. It's hard to see how the urban canopy can be achieved. And kind of in parallel, but separate to that, is the whole idea of green space and park space per person. Land is getting more expensive. We're getting more people and less parkland for each of those people. And it's hard to see that reversing as it's getting prohibitively more expensive and difficult to find actual green space for public space. So I'm wondering how the 40% urban or canopy is going to be achieved, and if that's a by sector, or if that's we're going to do it at the outskirts of the city kind of thing, or how the inner core kind of gets its trees protected. I know you mentioned the curb cuts thing. I know you mentioned the new tree bylaw. Those in themselves, to me, seem like it's not going to be enough to counteract all the other things. And I'm wondering how downtown people get their parks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sue. So no, the target wasn't met, and we know the target wasn't met. At the same time, I don't think we can say that the city is walking back from the target. What you're going to see in the official plan, and if you have a copy somewhere, page 84, is that we have new policies that say provide new parks in the downtown core and in the inner urban area. So the way that the city operates is that there's many different plans. There's the official plan, which comes under the Planning Act. And then there's the Transportation Master Plan and the Infrastructure Master Plan. And there's also a Parks and Green Space Master Plan. The Parks and Green Space Master Plan is where you're going to find the strategy of where new parks, where the city is going to look for new parks. What the plan does, the official plan, is that under the Planning Act, it basically sets out a few rules of what we do when people redevelop. There's something called parkland dedication. So when people redevelop, they owe the city for parks. We can either take cash for parks or land for parks. And there's a policy here that says in the inner urban and in the downtown core, our first preference is going to be land rather than cash. So that especially on the bigger development sites, we get land for parks. And that should start to hopefully make a difference. Of course, the city can't determine when land comes up for redevelopment, but as it does, that's a new policy that you'll find there.
Thanks for that. And the tree canopy, in particular for the downtown core, is that tied to the green space, or is that something that you're looking to achieve separately, given all the challenges that we have on lots and the setbacks and all those things that have been mentioned already?
Oh, separately, exactly, because of all the challenges. Absolutely. You know, you should have trees on much more than just parks. You should have trees in general on streets and everything. So on that one, I'd like to take the question offline and get my colleagues from forestry to give you a written answer, because there's quite a bit that I think can be provided.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sue. We're going to move to Dow's Lake now. So is Carmen on the line with us? I see Joe Federico there.
Carmen's not with us tonight.
Okay.
She's at another meeting, the NCC.
Okay, fair enough. Is there a question?
I'll defer to Joe as well. So.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Okay,
Right,
Joe,
Kathy,
did you want to ask a question?
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to all the people asking such wonderful questions, and to Alain and to you, Sean, as well, for organizing this meeting. I would say that a lot of our concerns are similar to the ones that Sue brought up. We're at the far end of Ward 17 and kind of at the seawall of development. You know, I think that when we're talking about intensification, certainly there are very few examples within the ward that come close to the kind of development that we're surrounded by and seeing in the Carling Preston, Carling Bronson, and Dow's Lake area and the Glebe Annex. I think a concern that many of the residents have in this area is how new development and how the new plan will manage ongoing height around the neighborhoods. There's a feeling that that much of that height is walling in the neighborhood and changing the dynamic of both the neighborhood and the urban park.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, Joseph. I mean, in terms of the Dow's Lake Annex, there's obviously Bronson that has been the topic of many, many discussions, and the councillor knows full well that we want to start to see Bronson more as a neighborhood main street than as a highway. And there is a lot of efforts that the city has poured into discussions, and I don't think those are concluded by any means. We see this official plan as sort of reinforcing for the future the idea that Bronson should be more of a neighborhood main street. And in terms of the heights of the buildings, my comment with respect to the directions under main streets is valid for this one as well. There is no secondary plan for Bronson, but if there were, then the department could take a look at, on a more precise basis, what you do where. We have it in the draft official plan as a main street. It's a traditional main street already in the existing official plan, and we're continuing that. We want it to continue so that it linearly reaches Carleton University as well. And that whole stretch of Bronson by Carleton University with Old Ottawa South is obviously something that in the next 25 years, the city should probably continue to look at in terms of how that street evolves. The changes that have been made to that street to slow traffic down and provide safer cycling is a step in the right direction, but probably not a final destination. So these are things that I think can continue to evolve. These are discussions that can continue as we tackle each piece one after the other.
Thank you.
Joseph, if I can just jump in here, if you don't mind, since it came up about Bronson, because I live on Bronson. It is nice to hear that you're looking at Bronson as more of a residential street, at least until the Canal Bridge. I've lived here for over 30 years and raised both my kids in Bronson. So for that, I'm grateful and look forward to the increased tree foliage and other things that have been mentioned tonight.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And we, Bronson has been a project. There's been a bunch of tweaks, and we've been talking with planners, and there's going to get a renewal there. Once that LRT stage 2 is running and those buses are revamped off of Bronson that have been on there, there will be a renewal of Bronson. And we need to get that one right and really push hard because though Alain is great and has fantastic ideas, there's others at the city too that don't always agree. So we have our homework cut out for us there, but great comments. I'm going to move now. I think the last one for community associations is Chris Nanda. And I'm sorry, it's taking a little bit longer, but these are really great questions and really great answers. So this has been very helpful. So Chris Nanda, are you on the call with us? Riverside?
Yeah, I'm here. I mean, a lot of the questions have been, they're addressing common themes. We are very, I appreciate the shout out about the Alta Vista corridor. Unfortunately, part of it's been built through our neighborhood, so we don't really want to see it built anymore. I think one of the concerns we share is, I mean, there's plans, we get it. We live in the area that's the more heavily developed area of Alta Vista. We're not quite a 15-minute walking community, but I know that we do have a lot of concerns about what intensification will look like and loss of green space and tree canopy, and the importance of focusing development not on like actually making it with right next to LRTs, like true transit oriented development. So, I mean, that's one of the concerns that we have. It's also about managing the infrastructure, because I think several people have touched on it. If you have more people, there's going to be more demands on infrastructure. And when you build something, there's also maintenance costs associated with it. So those are some of the issues we deal with. And writ large, I'm still somewhat skeptical about this 400,000 person increase, particularly, a lot of uncertainty related to COVID. So I guess the real question would be, and again, people have touched on it. As you mentioned, that the official plan, there's still a second step of zoning to implement the plan. But as other people have noted, that the public doesn't have a lot of trust in being able to have meaningful consultation on zoning. So I guess the idea is something's going to get imposed on us, and we are just going to have to live with it. And it's going to be zoning hearings are going to be rubber stamped. So I guess that's
okay. Thanks.
That's in general our concerns.
That's very helpful. So Alain, on the three things, the AVTC, can we get that out of the official plan, number one? Number two, 400,000 related to COVID, and then number three, the OP versus zoning. I know you touched on that already, but those are the three I heard there.
Yeah, and the other thing I would just mention is again, we have.
I know lots of people take up time, but we gotta.
Yeah, no, I'll be real quick. It's just we don't also factoring into the COVID thing is we don't know how this is going to affect residential and work arrangements because so much is up in the air.
Yeah. So AVTC, COVID, and the what was the other one? Sorry.
So let me just start with
1,000 people with COVID. That was the second one.
Right. So, I mean, for the AVTC comment noted, like I said, we're here to listen. That comment goes into what we process. I see that it is there as a dotted line in the schedule. So it's something that we'll take back to our colleagues internally. And we hear loud and clear that there's interest in revisiting that. So comment noted on that. I think with respect to the 400,000 and COVID, I think it's important to remember that this is a long-term plan. So obviously right now we're in a very tough year. The border's closed. There's no immigration, at least not to the degree that we're used to. And immigration is really what feeds our population growth. But that's not forever. Just like social distancing is not forever. We've had all sorts of people, challenging us on, whether we should just let go of everything and accept that people are just going to move to the countryside because now everybody's going to work remotely. And we've said so far, no, quite the contrary. Just because this pandemic happened doesn't mean that we're, re-sprawling again. That's not what we're doing here. If anything, our folks in Ottawa Public Health have continuously reminded us of how important it is for neighborhoods to be walkable, accessible, diverse, so that people have access to the supports that they need, even in tough conditions like physical distancing, and how isolating that can be for people. And we took that very much to heart. One of the things that we noticed and really transfixed a lot of people, I think, last summer, is how the various measures that were little bits and pieces here and there to make the public space, the streets, the closures here and there, Bank Street through Centertown, and how that was so well used during weekends. All of these things are pointing to actually things that perhaps should stay post-COVID. There will come a time when people are not forced to physical distance anymore. We will be able to be in cafes and restaurants and buses and trains and sidewalks and cinemas and theaters and music venues together again. And that's what people want. That's the point of being in a city. And that's what we're planning for long term.
Okay. Great news to hear about the AVTC, that you'll take a look at that as well. That's a long-standing issue for our communities. So look, we're supposed to take a couple general questions. We can do that now. There was a question in the chat about, are we going to be taking the answers down and distributing to all communities? The answer is we'll take the chat questions down. We'll be writing those and submitting those to staff if we haven't got to those, but we're not recording. We're not taking down the questions and writing them down, or writing down the answers furiously here. This is a recording. The recording will be sent out to all community associations after, and you can share it with members and the broader community. So that's how we're doing it. The chat ones, if you write it in the chat, though, it will be recorded. So Barbara, you've had your hand up for a very long time. I'm going to let you go, and then I'm going to let Carol Brascoop go, and then we're going to go into the breakouts. Barbara, go ahead.
Okay, it was really a question. I've forgotten what the language is in the plan, but it was a question about the speed of change. And the way I read the plan was that we've been designated to move quickly, to change quickly. And I'm very concerned about that, and wondering why we cannot have a more slow, organic change while we indeed address all the issues that have been raised tonight.
Okay, good question. I think that's reference to the transformative overlay versus the more gradual one. Elaine, can you speak to that?
Yeah, no, comment noted, Barbara, and thanks for that. I think we want to take a look at how we explain the overlays and the purpose of the overlays a little better. The overlays do have to do with urban form and with evolution. But I think that to infer from that we're expecting neighborhoods with that that overlay to speed things up is not quite that. So I think we need to take that comment back and reframe how we explain the overlays in the official plan. It's a new concept, and it's useful to hear this feedback so that we can explain the concept better than it is right now.
And I've heard it a few times, Alain, that look, we're already a 15-minute community. We do want to locate more people here, but also true for the bungalow belt, right? Within the green belt and the bungalow belt, where they're not 15-minute communities yet, and let's get them transformed as soon as possible, and make sure that obviously we're adding more density, regenerating here as well, but we're already a 15-minute neighborhood. So I've heard that comment come out as well. So glad you're going to take some of that back. So Carol, you're going to go ahead, and then I'm sorry, we're going to have to go to the breakout rooms, and you can ask questions in there. So Carol, go ahead.
Yep. Thanks, Sean, and thank you, the City Hall staff, for being here tonight to answer questions. I've heard from a number of community members who are actually, to be honest, just waking up to the fact that this draft official plan is on the table. By having it dropped on communities in December, and being over Christmas and everything, trying to respond to it has been very challenging. And there's been little accessibility to the documents. There was a lot of people who asked, can I get a copy at the public library? And it was noted at our last community meeting that the document itself weighs over 7 pounds. So it is a weighty volume to get through. And as noted, people are confused about some of the terminology, the transects and the overlays. What does it mean? And if we're already a 50-minute neighborhood, why do we have to transform? As noted, I think you're going to do some more explanation on that. So I had a specific question that came up in our discussion last week. It was about site plan control, and maybe Alan can answer that. The plan makes reference to reduce site plan control for low-rise or mixed-use buildings that fulfill the regeneration objectives. Could you explain what requirements of site plan control that are currently in place would be reduced?
Well, we're still working through that, but the idea here is that if there are buildings that are small, low-rise, and that fit basically with what the zoning provides, that we keep the site plan control to the strict minimum, which is, drainage, grading, logistics, garbage, and if there's parking, how that works. Site plan control in the city of Ottawa can be a very, very convoluted process. It can cost more than $40,000 just to ask the question and just to go through the whole process. And we wanted to be able to scale that to what type of building we're talking about. For big high-rise buildings that have a lot of complexity, a lot of structural, a lot of ground investigation to be done, underground parking and everything, that's one thing. But for low-rise buildings, we thought that the process is not only heavy, but sometimes can discourage from the construction of the very small buildings that we're trying to encourage. I'm just getting a note here. Typical site plan control sometimes can go up to $170,000. So if you're doing a low-rise building, in proportion to what you're doing, is that the right thing to do? And what the city needs to understand is, where does it land on the property? How does it work? How do the logistics work? How does the drainage work, etc. And then if all that checks out and we're satisfied, and the department signs off and the engineers sign off, then basically it's to scale the process to the scale of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, everyone, I think we're going to move into the breakout rooms, which is why we have all these other folks from planning here to answer questions specifically. So hopefully we can go to maybe a bit later than 8:30, maybe 8:45, but